Peter Cushing was one of the great legendary actors of British cinema, known for his precise, commanding performances. I very much remember the tremendous opening of Frankenstein Created Woman, where he's been frozen and he gets out of the deep freeze and he's brought back to life, I think by electrolysis. He's covered in crystals of ice, and he sits up, takes his pocket watch out of his jacket and says, "I have been dead for fully 5 minutes, yet my soul has not left my body." And he had this extraordinary range from George Orwell, 1984, to Hamlet, to horror films. One of his most iconic roles for the majority of people who watch cinema today would be the Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars The New Hope in 1977, the first Star Wars film, made on a bit of a shoestring. And Cushing's performance was the cold, authoritarian, imperial commander. It left an indelible mark on the Star Wars universe, despite his relatively brief screen time, and his portrayal was notable for the precision and the aristocratic menace that he brought to the role. And why would he not? That's what he'd been doing for years, setting the standard for future villains in the series. And of course, I suppose, giving a sort of nudge to Christopher Lee to turn up later. And in 2016, over 2 decades after his death in 1994, Cushing's likeness was digitally recreated for Rogue One, which takes place shortly before the events of the 1977 film. And advances in AI and computer technology made it possible to resurrect Cushing in a realistic fashion, using the actor Guy Henry as a physical stand-in, whose performance was digitally altered to resemble Cushing's. I remember looking at this film very carefully, in fact frame by frame, because I was fascinated by the technology using 3D software, things like Maya, and camera and tracking to make sure that the face clung to the actor. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I didn't think it was quite right, but the technological feat was groundbreaking, and it also equally sparked ethical and legal debates about the use of the actor's image posthumously. And the ongoing High Court legal battle now centres on whether the use of Cushing's image in Rogue One violated agreements made with Cushing before his death, mostly about a television film which never came off, raising questions about ownership. Who owns that way? Who owns that face? Who owns that face? And consent, and the commodification, if that's a word, of a deceased actor's likeness. Beyond Star Wars, and of course this is important because more recently Heath Ledger and Oliver Reed and I think there was somebody else who died. In the car film, I forget what it's called now. So how does a film company which has invested millions of pounds in a film deal with the possibility of one of their main actors dying in the middle of a production? Beyond Star Wars, Cushing was a brilliant and versatile actor. He gained fame in the 1950s and the 1960s for his work in the Hammer horror films, where he became synonymous with films like Dr. Frankenstein and Dracula's Van Helsing. And his performance of Dr. Frankenstein in The Curse of Frankenstein in 1957 was revolutionary. He played the Doctor not as a mad scientist, but as an obsessive genius, bringing a new complexity to the character that reshaped the way audiences viewed the story. His Van Helsing in The Horror of Dracula the following year, opposite Christopher Lee's Dracula, remains one of the most iconic portrayals of the vampire hunter. I remember him later on in Dracula 1972 and the Satanic Rites of Dracula, just spectacularly precise. And his portrayal of Sherlock Holmes in The Hound of the Baskervilles in 1959, where he was alongside Andre Morel, who played Watson. Both of them, I think, gave the most distinctive and the most sort of iconic portrayal of those two people. What made Cushing's Holmes so distinctive was his combination of sharp intellect and dry wit, capturing the detective's relentless pursuit of truth without making him overly cold or detached. I think it was a remarkably warm performance, and he then reprised it a few more times in second-rate films, but a first-rate performance. And the chemistry between Cushing and Andre Morel added depth to that performance, portraying a true partnership of equals rather than this typical dynamic of a brilliant Holmes and a bumbling Watson. And Cushing's acting career spanned several decades and ranged from Hamlet in 1948, where he worked with Laurence Olivier, to a wide variety of genre films, mostly in horror. But his ability to imbue characters with a unique combination of intensity, dignity, charm. The charm, remember the extraordinary charm with Morecambe and Wise, a versatile and captivating, a funny performer. And that I think his understanding of humour, in a way, his understanding of camp, and his impeccable timing. His acting career, it's iconic. And the ethical implications of digitally resurrecting actors like Peter Cushing raise profound questions about legacy, artistic control, and the future of film. And while technological innovations can preserve performances and allow them to live on in new contexts, they also challenge our understanding of consent, creative ownership, in an era where AI, artificial intelligence, and CGI can blur the lines between genuine reality and fiction in a way that editing and the manipulation of images never quite does. It's this, I think it comes very close to theft and impersonation, of course. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the hard line should be drawn. And I would very much welcome your thoughts on this one. And I'd be very interested to know what you've got to say. I would love to hear your wonderful praise for the great Peter Cushing. I don't think one could ever praise him enough, frankly. It would be lovely to hear all your favourite films. What was the first Peter Cushing film you ever saw? And yeah, please write the details below.